nuhah, joksosos, hies elgar, fe aistrydog, ugas, ostrod, aistei, abelia, joksosos, nuga aya, zro.
Welcome to the 267th of the Cthulhu Podcasts. I'm Felbrick. Today we're starting off with part 2 of chapter 1 of Sir Ernest Shackleton's book called South. Then we'll follow up with the next part of the dark, horrifying future of mankind in the Nightland. Let's go south. Chapter 2. New Land. The first day of the new year, January the 1st, 1915, was cloudy, with a gentle northerly breeze and occasional snow squalls. The condition of the pack improved in the evening, and after 8 p.m. we forged ahead rapidly through brittle young ice easily broken by the ship. A few hours later, a moderate gale came up from the east, with continuous snow. After 4 a.m. on the 2nd, we got into the thick old pack ice, showing signs of heavy pressure. It was much hummocked, but large areas of open water and long leads to the southwest continued until noon. The position was then latitude 69 degrees 49 minutes south, longitude 15 degrees 42 minutes west, and the run for the 24 hours had been 124 miles, south by 3 degrees west. This was cheering. The heavy pack blocked the way south after midday. It would have been almost impossible to have pushed the ship into the ice, and in any case, the gale would have made such a proceeding highly dangerous. So we dodged along to the west and north, looking for a suitable opening towards the south. The good run had given me hope of sighting the land on the following day, and the delay was annoying. I was growing anxious to reach land on account of the dogs, which had not been able to get exercise for 4 weeks and were becoming run down. We passed at least 200 bergs during the day, and we noticed also large masses of hummocky bay ice and foot ice. One floe of bay ice had black earth upon it, apparently basaltic in origin, and there was a large berg with a broad band of yellowish-brown right through it. The stain may have been volcanic dust. Many of the bergs had quaint shapes, and there was one exactly resembling a large two-funnel liner, complete in silhouette except for smoke. Later in the day we found an opening in the pack and made 9 miles to the southwest, but at 2 a.m. on January the 3rd the lead ended in hummocky ice impossible to penetrate. A moderate easterly gale had come up with snow squalls, and we could not get clear view in any direction. The hummocky ice did not offer a suitable anchorage for the ship, and we were compelled to dodge up and down for 10 hours before we were able to make fast to a small floe under the lee of a berg 120 feet high. The berg broke the wind and saved us drifting fast to leeward. The position was latitude 69 degrees 59 minutes south and longitude 17 degrees 31 minutes west. We made a move again about 7 p.m. when we took in the ice anchor and proceeded south, and at 10 p.m. we passed a small berg that the ship had nearly touched 12 hours previously. Obviously we were not making much headway. Several of the bergs passed during this day were of solid blue ice, indicating true glacier origin. By midnight of the 3rd, we'd made 11 miles to the south, and then came to a full stop in weather so thick with snow that we could not learn if the leads and lanes were worth entering. The ice was hummocky, but fortunately the gale was decreasing, and after we had scanned all the leads and pools within our reach, we turned back to the northeast. 2 sperm and 2 large blue whales were sighted, the first we'd seen for nearly 260 miles. We saw also petrels, numerous adelays, emperors, crab-eaters and sea leopards. The clearer weather of the morning showed us that the pack was solid and impassable from the southeast to the southwest, and at 10 a.m. on the 4th we again passed within 5 yards of the small berg that we had passed twice on the previous day. We had been steaming and dodging about over an area of 20 square miles for 50 hours, trying to find an opening to the south, southeast or southwest, but all the leads ran north, northeast or northwest. It was as though the spirits of the Antarctic were pointing us to the backward track, the track we were determined not to follow. Our desire was to make easting as well as southing, so as to reach the land. If possible, east of Ross's furthest south, and well east of Coates Land. This was more important as the prevailing winds appeared to be easterly, and every mile of easting would count. In the afternoon, we went west in some open water, and by 4 p.m. we were making west-southwest with more water opening up ahead. The sun was shining brightly, over 3 degrees high at midnight, and we were able to maintain this direction in fine weather until the following afternoon. The position then was latitude 70 degrees 28 minutes south, longitude 20 degrees 16 minutes west, and the run had been 62 miles. At 8 a.m. there had been open water from north round to the west to the southwest, but impenetrable pack to the south and east. At 3 p.m. the way to the southwest and west-northwest was absolutely blocked, and as we experienced a set to the west, I did not feel justified in burning more of the reduced stock of coal to go west or north. I took the ship back over our course for 4 miles to a point where some looser pack gave faint promise of a way through. But after battling for 3 hours with very heavy hummocked ice and making 4 miles to the south, we were brought up by huge blocks and floes of very old pack. Further effort seemed useless at that time, and I gave the order to bank the fires after we had moored the Endurance to a solid floe. The weather was clear, and some enthusiastic football players had a game on the floe, until about midnight Worsley dropped through a hole in the rotten ice while retrieving the ball. He had to be retrieved himself. Solid pack still barred the way to the south on the following morning, January the 6th. There was some open water north of the floe, but as the day was calm, I did not wish to use coal in a possibly vain search for an opening to the southward. I kept the ship moored to the floe. This pause in good weather gave an opportunity to exercise the dogs, which were taken onto the floe by the men in charge of them. The excitement of the animals was intense. Several managed to get into the water, and the muzzles they were wearing did not prevent some hot fights. 2 dogs which had contrived to slip their muzzles fought themselves into an icy pool and were hauled out still locked in a grapple. However, men and dogs enjoyed the exercise. A sounding gave a depth of 2,400 fathoms with a blue mud bottom. The wind freshened from the west early the next morning, and we started to skirt the northern edge of the solid pack in the easterly direction under sail. We'd cleared the close pack by noon, but the outlook to the south gave small promise of useful progress, and I was anxious now to make some easting. We went northeast under sail, and after making 39 miles passed a peculiar berg that we had been abreast of 60 hours earlier. Killer whales were becoming active around us, and I had to exercise caution in allowing anyone to leave the ship. These beasts have a habit of locating a resting seal by looking over the edge of a floe, and then striking through the ice from below in search of a meal, and they would not distinguish between seal and man. The noon position on January the 8th was latitude 70 degrees 0 minutes south, longitude 19 degrees 9 minutes west. We'd made 66 miles in a northeasterly direction during the preceding 24 hours. The course during the afternoon was east-southeast through loose pack and open water, with deep hummocky floes to the south. Several leads to the south came in view, but we held on the easterly course. The floes were becoming looser, and there were indications of open water ahead. The ship passed not fewer than 500 bergs that day, some of them very large. A dark water sky extended from east to south-southeast on the following morning, and the Endurance, working through the loose pack at half speed, reached open water just before noon. A rampart berg 150 feet high and a quarter of a mile long lay at the edge of the loose pack, and we sailed over a projecting foot of this berg into rolling ocean, stretching to the horizon. The sea extended from a little to the west of south round to the east to the north-northeast, and its welcome promise was supported by deep water sky to the south. I laid a course south by east in the endeavour to get south and east of Ross's furthest south, latitude 71 degrees 30 minutes south. We kept the open water for 100 miles, passing many bergs but encountering no pack. 2 very large whales, probably blue whales, came up close to the ship, and we saw spouts in all directions. Open water inside the pack in that latitude might have the appeal of sanctuary to the whales, which are harried by man further north. The run southward in blue water with a path clear ahead and the miles falling away behind us was a joyful experience after the long struggle through the ice lanes. But, like other good things, our spell of free movement had to end. The Endurance encountered the ice again at 1 a.m. on the 10th. Loose pack stretched east and south, with open water to the west and a good water sky. It consisted partly of heavy hummocky ice showing evidence of great pressure, but contained also many thick, flat floes, evidently formed in some sheltering bay and never subjected to pressure or to much motion. The swirl of the ship's wash brought diatomaceous scum on both sides of this ice. The water became thick with diatoms at 9 a.m., and I ordered a cast to be made. No bottom was found at 210 fathoms. The Endurance continued to advance southward through the loose pack that morning. We saw the spouts of numerous whales and noticed some hundreds of crab-eaters lying on the floes. White-rumped terns, Antarctic petrels, now snow petrels, were numerous, and there was a colony of adeles on a low berg. A few killer whales, with their characteristic high dorsal fin, also came in view. The noon position was latitude 72 degrees 2 minutes south, longitude 17 degrees 7 minutes west, and the run for the 24 hours had been 136 miles southeast. We were now in the vicinity of the land discovered by Dr. W. S. Bruce, leader of the Scotia expedition in 1904, and named by him Coates Land. Dr. Bruce encountered an ice barrier in latitude 72 degrees 18 minutes south, longitude 10 degrees west, stretching from the northeast to the southwest. He followed the barrier edge to the southwest for 150 miles and reached latitude 74 degrees 1 minute south, longitude 22 degrees west. He saw no naked rock, but his description of rising slopes of snow and ice with shoaling water off the barrier wall indicated clearly the presence of land. It was up these slopes, at a point as far south as possible, that I planned to begin the march across the Antarctic continent. All hands were watching now for a coast described by Dr. Bruce, and at 5 p.m. the lookout reported the appearance of land to the south-southeast. We could see a gentle snow slope rising to a height of about 1,000 feet. It seemed to be an island or a peninsula with a sound on its south side, and the position of its most northerly point was about 72 degrees 34 minutes south, 16 degrees 40 minutes west. The Endurance was passing through heavy, loose pack, and shortly before midnight she broke into a lead of open sea along a barrier edge. A sounding within 1 cable's length of the barrier edge gave no bottom, with 210 fathoms of line. The barrier was 70 feet high, with cliffs of about 40 feet. The Scotia must have passed this point when pushing to Bruce's furthest south on March the 6th, 1904, and I knew from the narrative of that voyage, as well as from our own observation, that the coast trended away to the southwest. The lead of open water continued along the barrier edge, and we pushed forward without delay. An easterly breeze brought cloud and falls of snow during the morning of January the 11th. The barrier trended southwest by south, and we skirted it for 50 miles until about 11 a.m. The cliffs in the morning were about 20 feet high, and by noon they'd increased to 110 and 115 feet. The brow apparently rose 20 to 30 feet higher. We were forced away from the barrier once for 3 hours by a line of very heavy pack ice. Otherwise there was open water along the edge, with high loose pack to the west and northwest. We noticed a seal bobbing up and down in an apparent effort to swallow a long silvery fish that projected at least 18 inches from its mouth. The noon position was latitude 73 degrees 13 minutes south, longitude 20 degrees 43 minutes west, and a sounding then gave 155 fathoms at a distance of a mile from the barrier. The bottom consisted of large igneous pebbles. The weather then became thick, and I held away to the westward, where the sky had given indications of open water, until 7 p.m., when we laid the ship alongside a floe in loose pack. Heavy snow was falling, and I was anxious lest the westerly wind should bring the pack hard against the coast and jam the ship. The Nimrod had a narrow escape from a misadventure of this kind in the Ross Sea early in 1908. We made a start again at 5 a.m. the next morning, January the 12th, in overcast weather with mist and snow showers, and 4 hours later broke through the loose pack ice into open water. The view was obscured, but we proceeded to the southeast, and had gained 24 miles by noon, when 3 soundings in latitude 74 degrees 4 minutes south, longitude 22 degrees 48 minutes west, gave 95, 128, and 103 fathoms, with a bottom of sand, pebbles, and mud. Clark got a good haul of biological specimens in the dredge. The Endurance was now close to what appeared to be the barrier, with a heavy pack ice foot containing numerous bergs frozen in and possibly aground. The solid ice turned away towards the northwest, and we followed the edge for 48 miles north until 60 degrees west to clear it. Now we were beyond the point reached by the Scotia, and the land underlying the ice sheet we were skirting was new. The northerly trend was unexpected, and I began to suspect that we were really rounding a huge ice tongue attached to the true barrier edge and extending northwards. Events confirmed this suspicion. We skirted the pack all night, steering northwest, then went west by north until 4 a.m. and round to the southwest. The course at 8 a.m. on the 13th was south-southwest. The barrier at midnight was low and distant, and at 8 a.m. there was merely a narrow ice foot about 200 yards across, separating it from the open water. By noon there was only an occasional shelf of ice foot. The barrier in one place came within an easy sweep to the sea. We could have landed stores there without difficulty. We made a sounding, 400 feet, off the barrier, but got no bottom at 676 fathoms. At 4 p.m., still following the barrier to the southwest, we reached a corner and found it receding abruptly to the southeast. Our way was blocked by very heavy pack, and after spending 2 hours in a vain search for an opening, we moored the Endurance to a floe and banked the fires. During that day, we passed 2 schools of seals swimming fast for the northwest and north-northeast. The animals swam in close order, rising and blowing like porpoises, and we wondered if there was any significance to their journey northward at that time of year. Several young emperor penguins had been captured and brought aboard the previous day. 2 of them were still alive when the Endurance was brought alongside the floe. They promptly hopped onto the ice, turned round, bowed gracefully 3 times, and retired to the far corner of the floe. There is something curiously human about the manners and movements of these birds. I was becoming concerned about the dogs. They were losing condition, and some of them appeared to be ailing. One dog had to be shot on the 12th. We did not move the ship on the 14th. A breeze came from the east in the evening, and under its influence, the pack began to work offshore. Before midnight, the close ice that had barred our way opened and left a lane along the foot of the barrier. I decided to wait for the morning, not wishing to risk getting caught between the barrier and the pack in the event of the wind changing. A sounding gave 1,357 fathoms, with a bottom of glacial mud. The noon observation showed the position to be latitude 74 degrees 9 minutes south, longitude 27 degrees 16 minutes west. We cast off at 6 a.m. on the 15th in hazy weather with a northeasterly breeze, and proceeded along the barrier in open water. The course was southeast for 16 miles, then south-southeast. We now had solid pack to windward, and at 3 a.m. we passed a bight, probably 10 miles deep and running to the northeast. A similar bight appeared at 6 p.m. These deep cuts strengthened the impression we'd already formed that several days we'd been rounding a great mass of ice, at least 50 miles across, stretching out from the coast and possibly destined to float away at some time in the future. The soundings, roughly 200 fathoms at the landward side and 1,300 fathoms at the seaward side, suggested that this mighty projection was afloat. Seals were plentiful. We saw large numbers on the pack and several on the low parts of the barrier where the slope was easy. The ship passed through large schools of seals swimming from the barrier to the pack offshore. The animals were splashing and blowing around the Endurance, and Hurley made a record of this unusual sight with a kinematograph camera. The barrier now stretched to the southwest again. Sail was set to a fresh easterly breeze, but at 7 p.m. it had to be furled, the Endurance being held up by pack ice against the barrier for an hour. We took advantage of the pause to sound and got 268 fathoms with glacial mud and pebbles. Then a small lane appeared ahead. We pushed through at full speed, and at 8:30 p.m. the Endurance was moving southward with sails set in a fine expanse of open water. We continued to skirt the barrier in clear water. I was watching for possible landing places, though as a matter of fact, I had no intention of landing north of Vachel Bay in Leopold Land, except under pressure of necessity. Every mile gained towards the south meant a mile less sledging when the time came for the overland journey. Shortly before midnight on the 15th, we came abreast of the northern edge of the great glacial or overflow from the inland ice, projecting beyond the barrier into the sea. It was 400 or 500 feet high, and at its edge was a large mass of thick bay ice. The bay formed by the northern edge of this glacier would have made an excellent landing place. A flat ice foot nearly 3 feet above sea level looked like a natural quay. From this ice foot, a snow slope rose to the top of the barrier. The bay was protected from the southeasterly wind and was open only to the northerly wind, which is rare in those latitudes. A sounding gave 80 fathoms, indicating that the glacier was aground. I named the place Glacier Bay, and had reason later to remember it with regret. The Endurance steamed along the front of this ice floe for about 17 miles. The glacier showed huge crevasses and high pressure ridges, and appeared to run back to ice-covered slopes or hills 1,000 or 2,000 feet high. Some bays in the front were filled with smooth ice, dotted with seals and penguins. At 4 a.m. on the 16th, we reached the edge of another huge glacial overflow from the ice sheet. The ice appeared to be coming over low hills and was heavily broken. The cliff face was 250 to 350 feet high, and the ice surface 2 miles inland was probably 2,000 feet high. The cliff front showed a tide mark of about 6 feet, proving that it was not afloat. We steamed along the front of this tremendous glacier for 40 miles, and then at 8:30 a.m. we were held up by solid pack ice, which appeared to be held by stranded bergs. The depth, 2 cables off the barrier cliff, was 134 fathoms. No further advance was possible that day, but the noon observation, which gave the position, was latitude 76 degrees 27 minutes south, longitude 28 degrees 51 minutes west, showed that we had gained 124 miles to the southwest during the preceding 24 hours. The afternoon was not without incident. The bergs in the neighbourhood were very large, several being over 200 feet high, and some of them were firmly aground, showing tide marks. A barrier berg bearing northwest appeared to be 25 miles long. We pushed the ship against a small banded berg, from which Wordy secured several large lumps of biotite granite. While the Endurance was being held slow ahead against the berg, a loud crack was heard, and the geologists had to scramble aboard at once. The bands on this berg were particularly well defined. They were due to moranic action in the parent glacier. Later in the day, the easterly wind increased to a gale. Fragments of floe drifted past at about 2 knots, and the pack to the leeward began to break up fast. A low berg of shallow draught drove down into the grinding pack and, smashing against 2 larger stranded bergs, pushed them off the bank. The 3 went away together, pell-mell. We took shelter under the lee of a large stranded berg. Now it's time to return to the horrors of the Nightland, with part 2 of Chapter 4. Yet now, as may be supposed, with all the peoples of the mighty pyramid grown eager to look towards one part of the Nightland, the embrasures were hid in the crowds, and such as could gain no view therethrough thronged about the view tables. And so was it all in the hours of leisure, so that women had scarce patience to attend their children, but must hasten to watch again that lonesome band of foolish youths, making so blind and unshaped a trial to come upon that unknown lesser redoubt, somewhere out there in the night of the world. And in this wise passed 3 days and nights, yet both in the sleep time and the time of waking did great multitudes cease not to watch, so that many went hungry for sleep, as in truth did I. And sometimes we saw those youths with plainness, but other times they were lost to our sight in the utter shadows of the Nightland. Yet by the telling of our instruments and the sense of my hearing, there was no awareness amongst the monsters, and the forces of evil that were abroad from the pyramid, so that a little hope came into our hearts that yet there might be no tragedy. And times would they cease from their way, and sit about in circles amongst the shadows and the grey moss bushes which grew hardily here and there about, and we knew that they had food with them to eat, for this could we see plainness, as some odd grim flare of light from the infernal fires struck upon one or another strangely, and passed and left them in the darkness. And who of you shall conceive what was in the hearts of the fathers and the mothers that bore these youths, and who never ceased away from the northward embrasures, but spied out in terror and in tears, and maybe oft with so good glasses as did show them the very features and look upon the face of sun and sun? And the kin of the watchers brought to them food, and tended them, so that they had no need to cease from their watching. And beds were made in the embrasures, rough and resourceful, that they might sleep quickly a little, yet be ever ready if those cruel monsters without made discovery of those their children. Thrice in those 3 days of journeying to the northward did the youths sleep, and we perceived that some kept a watch, and so knew that there was a kind of order and leadership amongst them. Also they had each his weapon upon his hip, and this gave to us a further plea to hope. And concerning this same carrying of weapons, I can but set out here that no healthful male or female in all the mighty pyramid but possessed such a weapon, and was trained to it from childhood, so that a ripe and extraordinary skill in the use thereof was common to most. Yet some breaking of rule there had been, that the youths had each achieved to be armed. For the weapons were stored in every 10th house of the cities, in the care of the charging masters. And here I must make known that these weapons did not shoot, but had a disc of grey metal, sharp and wonderful, that spun in the end of a rod of grey metal, and were some ways charged by the earth current, so that were any but stricken thereby they were cut in twain so easy as aught. And the weapons were contrived to the repelling of any army of monsters that might make to win entrance to the redoubt. And to the eye they had somewhat the look of strange battle axes, and might be lengthened by the pulling out of the handles. Now the youths made, as I have told, to the northward, but had first to keep a long way to the northeast, that they might come clear of the Vale of Red Fire. And this wise they journeyed and kept the vale about 7 miles to the northwest of them, so they were presently beyond the watcher of the northeast, and going with a greater freedom, and having less care to hide. And this way, it may be, certain of the giants wandering perceived them, and went swiftly to make attack and to destroy them. But some order went about amongst the youths, and they made a long line with a certain space between each, because of the terror of their weapon, and immediately, it seemed, the giants were upon them. 67 they were, and seeming to be haired like mighty crabs, as I saw with the great spyglass, when the great flares of far and mighty fires threw their fierce light across the dark lands. And there was a great and horrid fight, for the youths broke into circles about each of the giants, and many of those young men were torn in pieces. But they smote the monsters from behind and upon every side, and we of the mighty pyramid could behold at times the grey strange gleam of their weapons. And the ether was stirred about me by the passing of those that died. Yet by reason of the great miles their screams came not to us, neither heard we the roars of the monsters. But into our hearts, even from that great distance and safety, there stole the terror of those awesome brutes. And in the great spyglass I could behold the great joints and limbs, and e'en, I thought, the foul sweat of them, and their size and brutishness was like that too of odd monstrous animals of the olden world, yet part human. And it must be borne to mind that the fathers and the mothers of those youths beheld all this dread fight from the embrasures, and their other kin likewise watched, and a very drear sight was it to see their hearts and their human natural feelings, and like to breed old age ere its due. Then, in time, the fight ceased, for of those 27 giant brutes there remained none, only that there cumbered the ground 27 lumbering hillocks, dreadful and grim, for the lesser dead we could not see proper. And we that were within the pyramid saw the youths sorted again together by their leaders, all in the dim twilight of that place. And with a great spyglass I made a rough count, and found that there lived of them 300, and by this shall you know the power of those few monstrous things, which had slain full 200, though each youth was armed with so wondrous a weapon. And I set the word through the pyramid, that all might have some knowledge of the number that had died, for it was better to know than to be in doubt. and no spyglass had the power of the great spyglass. After this fight, the youths spent a time having a care to their bodies and wounds, and some were made separate from the others, and of these I counted upon 50. And whilst the others made to continue their march towards the road where the Silent Ones walk, these were constrained by one who was the leader to return to the pyramid. And in a little I saw that they came towards us, wearily and with many a halt, as that they that suffered great wounds and harm of the fight. But those others, maybe 250 youths, went onwards into the Nightland. And though we sorrowed at this thing, yet was there come a huge pride into our hearts that those raw ones who yesterday were but children had so held themselves in battle, and done a great deed that day. And I wot that whilst their mothers wept, easeless in their fathers' hearts swelled within them and held somewhat of their pain away from them for a time. And all this while those wounded youths came slowly, and rested and came on again, the better helping the worse, and a great excitement and trouble there was in all the mighty pyramid, to learn which were those that came, and they that went, and who lay out there quietly among the slain. But none might say anything with surety, for even with that great spyglass in the tower of observation, they were not over plain, save when some light from the fires of the land flared up, and lit them for a moment. For they stood not up in the glare of the fires, as had the giants, and though I saw them with clearness, yet I knew not them, for there was so mighty a multitude in that vast redoubt that none might ever know even half of their rulers. And about this time there came a fresh matter of trouble to our minds, for one of the Monstruwakans made report that the instruments were recording an influence abroad in the night, so that we had knowledge that one of the evil forces was out. And to me there came an awareness that a strange unquiet stole over the land, yet I knew it not with mine ears, but my spirit heard, and it was as though trouble and an expectation of horror did swarm about me. And once, listening, I heard the master word beating strangely low, and I knew the ether to thrill about me, and a faint stirring was there in my soul, as of a faint voice speaking. And I knew that Nani called to me some message across the night of the world, yet weak, and coming without clear meaning, so that I was tormented and could but send comfort to her with my brain elements. And presently I knew that she ceased to speak. And later I heard that there was a new matter forward in the redoubt, for 10,000 men had assembled to attend the room of preparation for the short preparation, and by this we knew that those poor youths who stumbled towards us through the dark were presently to have help. And through all the sleep time there went forward the spiritual and physical preparation of the 10,000, and upon the morrow they slept, whilst 100,000 made ready their arms. And in this space of time, the 250 youths that went towards the road where the Silent Ones walk had come very nigh thereto, having gone very warily and with some slowness, because as may be of the lesson of the giants. And as to us in the pyramid, the instruments had made known constantly that the influence which was abroad, and which all the tower of observation thought to proceed from the house of silence, yet nothing could we see with the great spyglass, and so could come to no sure knowing, but only to fear and to wonder. And presently the youths were upon the great road, and turned to the northward, and beyond them a great distance stood the house of silence, upon a low hill at a certain distance to the right of the road. By now they that were wounded had come to within maybe 15 miles of the great redoubt, and the news went out through all the cities that the 10,000 men that were prepared made to arm themselves, and I went down by the tower lift, and saw them come down by thousands from the room of preparation, and none might go nigh to them to cause them to speak, for they were made ready, and were, as it might be, holy. And all the millions of the mighty pyramid stood in their cities about certain of the main lifts, and watched those thousands go downwards, all in their armour of grey metal, and each one armed with the discus, which was that same very terrible weapon which all had training to. and I doubt not but the young men of the pyramid looked with longing in their hearts that they might have been amongst those that went forth to succour. Yet the older men had graver thoughts in their hearts, for the blood ran more soberly in them, and they had knowledge and memory of the peril. And by this I would make clear that I speak less of the peril of the body, which is common to every state of life, but the peril of the spirit. And it may be thought by those of this age that it was most strange that they of that, having all that knowledge of eternity to aid them, had no weapon by which to shoot and to kill at a distance. But indeed this had not been so in the past, as our histories did show, for some wondrous weapons there had been, that might slay without sound or flash at a full score miles and more. And some we had whole and within the great museum, and of others but the parts in decay, for there had been foolish things and reckless to use, for we of that great pyramid wanted not to kill a few of the monsters that lay at a great distance, but only those that came nigh to harm us. And concerning those same weapons that killed silently at a great distance, we had now little knowledge, save that they did waste the earth current, and no practice had we concerning their workings, for it was maybe 100,000 years gone that they had been used, and found to be of no great worth in a close attack, and harmful otherwise to the peace, in that they angered unneedful the forces of the land, slaying wantonly those monsters which did no more than beset the mighty redoubt at a great distance. For, as may be seen by a little thought, we did very gladly keep a reasonable quietness, and refrained from aught that should wake the land, for we were born to the custom of that strange life, and lived and died in peace, for the most part, and were very content to have a security, and to be neutral in all things that did not overbear us, but, as it were, we were always armed and ready. But concerning the great and evil forces that were abroad in the nightland, these we had no power to harm, nor could we hope for more than that we had security from them, which indeed we had. But the hugeness of their power was about us, and we dared not to wake it, save through such extremity as had come to pass by this folly of the youths, though even now we had no thought to attack aught, but only to succour those wounded ones. And concerning this simplicity of weapons, which excites somewhat even my wonder in this our present age, it may be that the powers of chemistry were some ways quaintly limited by conditions in that age, and there to be always a need to spare the earth current, and hence, by this cause and by that, we were brought by the extreme nigh to the simplicity of the early world, yet with a strange and mighty difference, as all may know who have read. Now presently the word was sent to every city throughout the great redoubt, as was the law, that the great gate would be opened, and each city sent its master to form the full watch, as was the law, and each went clad in grey armour, and carrying the discos, and the full watch numbered 2,000, for there was also the watchmen. Then the lights of the great causeway were made dim, so that the opening of the gate should cast no great glare from within into the nightland, to tell the watcher of the northwest, and all the monsters, that certain humans went out from the mighty pyramid. But whether the vast and hidden forces of evil had knowledge we knew not, and they who went must but chance it, remembering that they were prepared, and had the capsule. And the 10,000 that were prepared went out through the great gateway into the night. And the full watch stood back from them and spoke no word, but saluted silently with the discos, and they that went raised each the discos a little, and passed out into the dark. Then the great gate was shut, and we made to wait and to watch with the trouble and expectation within our hearts, and at the embrasures many did comfort the women of those men. And I went back, upwards by miles, until I came to the tower of observation, and I looked out from there into the nightland, and saw that the 10,000 halted at the circle, and made arrangement of themselves, and then sent some before and upon either hand, and so went forward into the nightland. And after that I went to the great spyglass, and turned it towards the 250 youths that were far off upon the road where the silent ones walk. Yet for a while I could not perceive them, for all the road seemed empty. But afterward I saw them, and they were clambering back into the road, having gone aside, as I thought, because of the passing of one of those silent ones that I saw now at a distance southward of them. There passed then some 3 hours, and in that time I varied watching between those far-off youths and the 10,000 that went forward to succour the wounded, that were now maybe scarce 9 miles distant from the mighty pyramid, and the 10,000 came very close to them. And in truth, in a little while they spied one another, and I gathered in spirit something of the rejoicing of those youths. Yet weak and troubled they were, because of their wounds and their knowledge of failure and their disobedience of the law. And presently they were surrounded by the 10,000, and carried upon slings, and all the body swung round towards the pyramid, and came back at a great pace. And in that same time I heard the sound that made them so swift to hasten. For there smote up through the night the baying of the hounds, and we knew that they were discovered. And I swept the great spyglass over the land towards the valley of the hounds, that I might discover them quickly. And I saw them come, lumbering, at a strange gallop, and great as horses, and it might be only 10 miles to the east. And I looked once upon the watcher of the northeast, and I saw and marvelled that the great bell ear quivered constantly, and I knew that it had knowledge, and gave signal to all the land. Then did one of the monstruwakons report that a new and terrible influence was abroad in the land, and by the instrument we had knowledge that it approached. And some of the monstruwakons called foolishly with weak voices to the 10,000 to haste, forgetting and desiring only their safety from that which came near. Then looking with the great spyglass, I saw that there moved across the land from the direction of the plain of blue fire a mighty hump, seeming of black mist, and came with prodigious swiftness. And I called to the master monstruwakon that he come and look through one of the eyepieces that were about the great spyglass. And he came quickly, and when he had looked a while he called to the monstruwakon that had made the report. And the monstruwakon answered, and replied that the influence drew nearer by the reading of the instrument, yet of that thing itself the man had no sight. And I ceased not to look, and in a little while the humped thing passed downwards into the valley of red fire, which lay across the land that way. But I watched steadfastly, and presently I saw the black hump climb up from the vale of red fire upon this side, and come through the night so that in scarce a minute it had come half-way across that part of the nightland. And my heart stood quiet with fear and the utter terror of this monster which I knew to be surely one of the great forces of evil of that land, and had power without doubt to destroy the spirit. And the master monstruwakon leapt towards the home call, and sent the great sound down to the 10,000, that they might attend, and immediately he signalled to them to beware. Yet already I perceived that they knew of this utter danger that was upon them, for I saw them slay the youths quickly, that their spirits might not be lost, for they were unprepared. But the men, being prepared, had the capsule, and would die swiftly in that last moment. I looked again towards the hump, and saw that it came like a hill of blackness in the land, and was almost anigh. Then there happened a wonder. For in that moment when all else had gone quickly, that they might save their souls out of the earth, there rose a little light like to the crescent of a young moon of this early day. And the crescent rose up into an arch of bright and cold fire, glowing but little, and it spanned above the 10,000 and the dead, and the hump stood still, and then went backwards and was presently lost. And the men came swiftly towards the mighty pyramid. Yet ere they were come to safety, the baying of the hounds sounded close upon them, and they faced the danger. Yet, as I could know without despair, because yet they lived after so enormous a peril. And the hounds were very nigh now, as I beheld with the great spyglass, and I counted 50, running with mighty heads low and in a pack. And lo, as the hounds came at them, the 10,000 drew apart and had a space between the men, that they might have full use of that terrible discus. And they fought with the handles at length, and I saw the discs spin and glisten and send out fire. Then there was a great battle, for the light that arched above them and held away the power from their souls made not to protect them from this danger of the lesser monsters. And at 100,000 embrasures within the mighty pyramid, the women cried and sobbed and looked again. And in the lower cities it was told after, that the peoples could hear the crash and the splinter of the armour as the hounds ran to and fro, slaying, and aye, even the sound of the armour between their teeth. Yet the 10,000 ceased not to smite with the discus, and they hewed the hounds into pieces. But of the men that went forth, there were 1,700 slain by the hounds ere the men won to victory. Then came that wearied band of heroes back to the home shelter of the vast redoubt, and they bore their dead with them, and the youths that they slew. And they were received with great honour and with exceeding grief, and in great silence, for the thing admitted not of words until a time had passed. And in the cities of the pyramid there was mourning, for there had been no sorrow like unto this through mayhap 100,000 years. And they bore the youths to their mothers and to their fathers, and the father of each made thanks to the men that they had saved the soul of his son, and the women were silent. Yet neither to the father nor to the mother was ever made known the name of the slayers, for this might not be, as all shall see with a little thought. And some did remember that in verity all was due to the unwisdom of these youths, who had heeded not the law and their life teachings. Yet they had paid to the utmost, and passed outwards, and the account of their deeds was closed. And all this while did their great numbers spy towards the road where the silent ones walk, that they might watch that band of youths afar in the nightland, who went forward amidst these horrid dangers. Yet when the dead youths had been brought in, many had ceased to look out for a time, and had turned to questioning, and some had made an inspection that they might know which had come back, and which lay out there where the giants had slain them, or went forward to where more dreadful matters. But who of those that were abroad were slain, or still went onward, we had but indifferent knowledge, though the men of the 10,000 knew somewhat, having had speech with the wounded youths ere they slew them. And as may be thought, these men were sorely questioned by the mothers and fathers of those youths that were not accounted of. Yet I doubt that few had much knowledge wherewith to console them. Now there was presently in the Garden of Silence, which was the lowermost of all the underground fields, the ending of those 1,700 heroes, and of the youths that they had saved and slew. And the garden was a great country, and 100 miles every way, and the roof thereof was 3 miles above, and shaped to a mighty dome, as it had been with the builders and makers thereof did remember in their spirits the visible sky of our present age. And the making of that country was all set out in a single history of 7,070 volumes, and there was likewise 7,070 years spent to the making of that country, so that their unremembered generations lived and laboured and died, and seen not the end of their labour. And love had shaped it and hallowed it, so that all the wonders of the world there had been that none shall ever come anigh to that country of silence, 100 miles every way, of silence to the dead. And there were in that roof 7 moons set in a mighty circle, and lit by the earth current, and the circle was 60 miles across, so that all the country of quiet was visible, yet to no great glare, but a sweet and holy light, so that I did always feel in my heart that a man might weep there, and be unashamed. And in the midst of that silent country there was a great hill, and upon the hill a vast dome, and the dome was full of a light that might be seen in all that country, which was the Garden of Silence, and beneath the dome was the crack, and within it the glory of the earth current from which all life and light and safety. And in the dome at the north there was a gateway, and a narrow road went upward to the gateway, and the road was named the Last Road, and the gateway was named by no name, but known to all simply as the Gateway. And there were in that mighty country long roadways and hidden methods to help travel, and constant temples of rest along the miles, and groves, and the charm of water falling, and everywhere the statues of memory, and the tablets of memory, and the whole of that great underground country full of an echo of eternity, and of memory, and love, and greatness, so that to walk alone in that land was to grow back to the wonder and mystery of childhood, and presently to go upwards again to the cities of the mighty pyramid, purified and sweetened of soul and mind. And in my boyhood I had wandered oft a week of days in that country of silence, and had my food with me, and slept amid the memories, and gone on again wrapped about with the quiet of the everlasting. And the man-soul within would be drawn mightily to those places where the great ones of the past eternity of the world had their memory named. But there was that within me which ever drew me in the ending to the hills of the babes, those little hills where might be heard, amid the lonesomeness of an utter quiet, a strange and wondrous echo as of a little child calling over the hills. But how this was I know not, save by the sweet cunning of some dead maker in the forgotten years. And here, mayhaps, by reason of this voice of pathos, were to be found the countless tokens of memory to all the babes of the mighty pyramid through 1,000 ages. And odd whiles would I come upon some mother, sitting there lonely, or mayhaps companied by others, and by this little telling shall you know somewhat of the quietness and the wonder and the holiness of that great country, hallowed to all memory and to eternity and to our dead. And it was here, into the country of silence, that they brought down the dead to their burial, and there came down into the country of silence maybe 100 million out of the cities of the pyramid to be present and to do honour. Now they that had charge of the dead did lay them upon the road which ran up to the gateway, even that same road which was named the last road. And the road moved upward slowly with the dead, and the dead went inward through the gateway, first the poor youths, and afterwards they that had given up life that they might save them. And as the dead went upwards, there was a very great silence over all the miles of the country of silence, and in a little while there came from afar off a sound as of a wind wailing, and it came onwards out of the distance, and passed over the hills of the babes which were a great way off, and so came anigh to the place where I stood. Even as the blowing of a sorrowful wind did it come, and I knew that all the great multitudes did sing quietly, and the singing passed onwards, and left behind it an utter silence, even as the wind doth rustle the corn and pass onwards, and all fall to a greater seeming quietness than before. And the dead passed inward through the gateway, into the great light and the silence of the dome, and came out no more. And again, from beyond the far hills of the babes, there was the sound of the millions singing, and there rose up out of all the earth beneath the voices of the underground organs, and the noise of the sorrow passed over me and went again into the distance, and left all hushed. And lo, as there passed inward to the silence of the dome the last of those dead heroes, there came again the sound from beyond the hills of the babes, and as it came more nigh, I knew that it was the song of honour, loud and triumphant, and sung by countless multitudes. And the voices of the organs rose up into thunder from deep earth, and there was a great honour done to the glory of the dead, and afterwards once more a silence. Then did the people of the cities arrange themselves, so that from every city whence had come a hero were the people of that city gathered together, and when they were so gathered, they set up tokens of memory to the dead of the city, and afterwards did charge artists to come making sculpture great and beautiful to that same end, and now did but place tablets against that time. And afterwards the people did wander over the country of silence, and made visit and honour to their ancestors, if such were deserving. And presently the mighty lifts did raise them all to the cities of the pyramid, and thereafter there was something more of usualness, save that ever the embrasures were full of those that watched the youths afar upon the great road. And in this place I to remember how that our spy-glasses had surely some power of the earth current to make greater the impulse of the light upon the eye, and they were like no spy-glass that ever you did see, but oddly shaped, and to touch both the forehead and the eyes, and gave wonderful sight of the land. But the great spyglass to be beyond all this, for it had the eyes upon it of every side of the mighty pyramid, and did it truly be a huge machine. And to me, as I went about my duties, or peered forth through the great spyglass at the youths upon the road where the silent ones walk, there came at times a faint, far thrilling of the ether, so that sometimes I was aware that there was the beating of the master word in the night, so strange and weak that the instruments had no wotting of it. And when this came, then would I call back through the everlasting night to Nani, who was indeed Murdath. But I would send the master word with my brain elements, and afterwards such comfort as I might make. Yet hard and bitter was the truth of my helplessness and weakness, and the utter terror and might of the evil forces and monsters of the nightland, so that I was like to have to break my heart with pondering. And the silence would come again, and anon the weak thrilling of the ether, but no more the far voice speaking to my soul. And that's all for today, except to remind you of my Patreon account, where you can support my production of audiobooks. As a Patreon, you'll get access not just to the stories published here in the podcast, but also to the other books that I record. At the moment, I'm recording Heart of Darkness, Recollections of Rifleman Harris, and a science fiction book called Masters of Space. Please go to patreon.com and search for Felbrigg, Felbrigg. This file is released on an attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives license. Until next time.
CthulhuPodcast.co.uk